Welcome to Jammin' with Jason Mefford, a show where we discuss topics relevant to chief audit executives and professionals in audit, risk, and compliance. We discuss the technical and soft skills needed to navigate the minefields of organizations. You hear best practices and practical advice for helping you advance your career, and we'll even talk about music, mindfulness, and psychology, because we can. So sit back and relax while you listen to the #1 podcast in the world for internal auditors, unscripted and unedited. Hey, welcome everybody. Today I am talking with John Fanning. And, as we were talking beforehand, a lot of different crossovers in both of our careers, kind of from an ethics and compliance standpoint. So I was really excited. John has some great experience and insight into the topic that we're going to be discussing today. So John, welcome aboard. Maybe I'm now, familiar with you, but let the listeners just kind of know a little bit about you and kind of your experience, because you've had some great experience over the years.
Thanks, Jason. I appreciate it. Yeah, I am. So currently, I am the Vice President of Business Development with Integrity Risk International, and I'm representing this company as well as I represent a software company in conjunction with it. So, but Integrity Risk is an enhanced due diligence and investigations firm, and they are run by some. Speaking, the name Integrity Risk is there for a reason. It's run by some guys who have a very high level of integrity and people that I truly respect. I worked with them before when I was at Kroll, and they spun off this company about 4 or 5 years ago, and basically put together a fantastic team of analysts and researchers and a network of investigators around the world. And so great guys. Jim and Tom McQueenie are the leaders there. They've also allowed me to work with a company called Librios. So I represent a data management software company that helps with incident responses and change management within not just the ethics and compliance space, but certainly in that area. A little bit of background on me. Have been in this space for over 20 years. I started out with a company called LexisNexis in their
little company
space.
Probably nobody's heard of.
Right, yeah, out of Dayton, Ohio, and was fascinated by LexisNexis, first of all, just because I was like, you can get information online and at your fingertips. And I'd actually read a book by Alvin Toffler called Future Shock that talked about how one day all your information would be in the palm of your hand. And I thought, well, this sounds like a company that's heading that direction. But I worked with corporations doing with their legal departments. And this is prior to Sarbanes-Oxley, prior to the FCPA really being a real thing. And so a lot of due diligence at looking at mergers and acquisitions. They would use LexisNexis's media and their public records to find information on companies. Early on in my career, I helped a company avoid buying another company that was in Europe that was incredibly corrupt and saved them millions of dollars. And I was hooked at that point on kind of doing due diligence. And then I later went to Thomson Reuters. And they, had similar products. They acquired a company called Clear, which did due diligence and was a public records database. And then I went to work for a company called Kroll, and Kroll was where I really got into the investigation space and the enhanced due diligence. And also very exciting work. Had to not talk about it too much, but doing investigations, people don't like you to brag about it.
And that's why investigations, everybody says, "Oh, that's got to be, it's such exciting work," and I'm like, well, it's kind of interesting, right? It is exciting in certain parts of it, but again, there's you can't really talk about it, because most of the time you're in stealth mode.
Right.
And so it is exciting, but I always not necessarily felt bad because people were making the choices for themselves, but I could empathize with the people who were the subject of the investigation and ended up having their life turned upside down because of bad mistakes they made. So it's exciting. That's what it was. I usually tell people it's exciting, but it's not necessarily fun work when you see the human impact of it. But
Yeah, and there's several examples of that. I mean, I've seen where one of the things that I really liked about the folks I worked with was they were professionals and they knew how to manage that process. And you have someone who's come forward to talk about something that they've seen, and if sometimes there's organized crime involved and things like that, and so being careful and making sure that you make the right moves at the right time, you understand the laws of the country, it was so imperative. And I saw things go well. I saw people try to cut corners, and they would cut us out for one reason or another, and then try to manage it internally. And I've seen things go horribly wrong in those cases as well. And so it's just interesting work. It is not inexpensive, and the customers were not happy to see you coming in the door because they knew that it was going to be expensive. But and the company I'm with now, Integrity Risk, we do that type of work as well too. And the thing I value about it is we do have some very sharp people, former FBI, former CIA, folks who, one gentleman who came from the Royal Hong Kong Police Force, and just, they know what they're doing. They've done it before, and they're going to try and do it cost effectively, but they're not going to do it if they can't do it right. And, we also, the enhanced due diligence component of it is so important too, because you can avoid a lot of these issues up front if you do the right things initially. And so, so from Kroll, I went on. I had a short stint at a company called Ethisphere, which really enhanced my love of just benchmarking your program, understanding ethics, and really letting the data speak for itself and take you where it needs to go, and being able to assess your program in a manner that will give you an idea of what needs to be improved, where you have your strengths, and how to best present that to the board, to your executive committee. And I've tried to carry that into what I'm doing now. I'm very independent. The guys at Integrity Risk gave me the ability to represent some other companies that were non-competing. One of those is Librios, which is a data company where they use keyword linking capabilities to manage the audit process, to manage the change management related to the findings from audits and from other type of evaluations, and to then automate that process so that the key stakeholders are alerted and that they go through the right training and things like that. And so my love is for making good companies even better and giving them processes that are affordable but effective in mitigating the risk. And the key is, I've always said you can eliminate all the risk if you just stop doing business, but that's not
that's not an option, right? So there
yeah.
has to be some risk along with it. But I think, like you said, it's especially important for people if you find yourself needing to do a serious investigation that's kind of high stakes, bring somebody in from the outside, because I've seen people really bungle things and make some big mistakes. If that's not your specific area of wheelhouse, make sure to go out, get somebody like Integrity Risk in to help you with it, because it's high stakes, it's higher risk, because when things go bad, actually sometimes you can expose your company to more risk, even if you do the investigation and everything wrong. As well. Plus, with things like, Librios and everything, a lot of this comes down to the documentation aspect and the compliance of it and your consistency in doing it as well. And if you are not consistent in what you do and how you discipline people or deal with things like that, again, you can significantly increase the exposure to your company. So, yeah, No, good stuff, and a very, very important part of what companies need to do to be able to keep themselves doing good things, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
well, and I know, since it's kind of the end of the year, I thought it would be fun to just talk a little bit about ethics, because I know, that's been your background as well. And I just see a lot of people really kind of misunderstanding ethics. And we go through ethics training per se,
Mm-hmm.
but it's more like checkbox ethics. Yep, I did my training. Boom, I checked a box. To me, most of the ethics training is not really about ethics. It's more about checking the box and being compliant, which is kind of sad. And anyway, so I figured we kind of jump in because there's another couple
Yeah.
of points too. But let's see where our conversation kind of goes on this for the next little while.
Yeah, no, and I agree. I don't think it's always intuitive. I think what people think when they think of ethics, and it's kind of seen through their own perceptive or their own perception or their own lens. And that's why training is very important. And I think not just training in regards to what you need to do to, as you called it, checkbox ethics, but to kind of level set the mindset and the objectives and the mission of the company and say, here's what we're all here for. Because there's a lot of people that there's individual interests, there's individual concerns, and people's own personal crusades that they pursue, and they feel like that is more important than anything else. And you want to give people ability to do that, because it certainly is a big part of what working in an organization is about, is giving people freedom to express themselves. But you want to set some parameters that are going to respect. My grandmother always said, your nose ends where mine begins. So,
Well,
yeah,
actually, I see a picture of Abraham Lincoln on your back wall. I think
yeah.
he was one that actually said that originally, or that I've heard actually attributed to him as well.
Is
So,
that right?
right
Okay,
on your
good.
grandmother, that is one of my favorite quotes of all times, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that really is a lot of into where we can go with this too, as far as the ethics, and where your nose ends, right? That's it stops there. So if I actually
Yeah,
punch you in the nose,
right.
I've crossed the line at that point. And I think it gets into some of the ethics is not, I usually say, so tell me if you agree with this too, but ethics is not as black and white as people think it is. There's shades of
Oh,
color, there's shades of gray along the way. There's always another side to the story, or another thing to consider as well. And that's why I think, some of the things that get so proscriptive to where it just becomes compliance, it kind of gets away from really what ethics and integrity is about in
no,
in, in its essence.
I would agree 100%. And I think one of the most exciting things that I've seen coming out lately is that the focus on culture. And I think culture, it really impacts, the ethical perspective of the company. If you have the right culture, you've communicated the right message, then you are able to, instill the right, I guess the right framework or the right guidance to the entire organization. And if you've got the right culture, it's going to a certain degree, police itself. And you don't have to be monitoring people 24 hours, 7 days a week. Everybody's going to self-monitor. They're going to, if there's something brought up around the, um, you know, on the Zoom call now, since we're not meeting in person, but traditionally around the coffee maker, if someone goes over the line, someone else will police them. They'll say something to them, confront them, and that's the best way to have it. I would rather have one guy go, "Hey, man, you don't need to go there," than
Mhm.
have it escalate and have someone's feelings hurt, and actually have it go somewhere else. And so I think that when people feel like they're operating in an environment that gives them some psychological security, or that makes them feel safe to be able to speak their mind, and I think then you can have open dialogue as long as you've built some parameters around it. I I think that's really what an ethics and compliance officer is trying to do. And if they can do that, it makes their job a lot easier. Otherwise, then they've got to be monitoring, then they have to be intervening, they have to be chasing down and investigating everything that comes through the hotline. And so if they can push some of that down to the mid-level managers and to the people who are in the field, then they can feel comfortable that things are running under a guise of a culture. And so that's what I've seen a lot of that. At Ethisphere, we did testing of cultures. We benchmarked people's cultures. I know there's a lot of other folks out there doing that. And you see, it almost has become, one of those terms that you cringe when you hear it because every article is about culture. But I really do think it's a great focus. And as long as people do it the right way, it's a way to kind of address that.
Well, it is, and I totally agree with you because if you can have the front line effectively self-policing, then it just makes your job much easier because you've got the right culture. But in one thing that you brought up that I've seen that I believe is so vital is that the culture allows people to speak up, but not just it allows people to speak up in general. It's a culture that allows people to have differing opinions, and it's okay within the organization, right? So much of the time you get told, look, it's like you got to go along with the party standard, if you will, right? And you've got to toe the line and you've got to say exactly this one thing. And as companies do that or try to force that type of a culture, it actually backfires on you because then people don't feel comfortable saying what needs to be said. And so they usually just don't say anything and they go along to get along because they realize, and this is where, the values are the one thing, but if I don't believe that you really are serious about, no, Jason, I want you to tell me if you don't agree with me. It's like everybody's had a boss like this, right? Where they're like, Jason, I want you to tell me if you don't agree with me. And it's like, yeah, I ain't going to do that. I saw what you did to the last person who disagreed with you, right? So it's important for the leaders, for the company, if they want that culture, that means that they're going to also probably hear some things they don't want to hear, and they're going to have to tolerate differing beliefs and other things like that, which again I think is where sometimes that word ethics I think gets misconstrued with morality, and it's not the same thing. It's okay for us to have differing views, right? As long as we're meeting a certain, that's why I like code of conduct better myself than a code of ethics, because it just sets the conduct expectations based on the culture and what we need to do without trying to mind control people.
No, exactly. I would agree 100%. And one of the things that I've seen that I think is really valuable is you see some tools being built to help to actually implement some of these things. And I saw that there's a hotline tool that has come out recently that, what it does is it allows you to make a report. And then that report is stored on the individual or the situation. And it doesn't actually escalate through the system until someone else makes a similar report about that individual. And so it's all done anonymously. Nobody is going to be penalized, but the people who need to know about the problem get to know about it, but it's verified before it goes up the food chain, because a lot of people do get their feelings hurt, and they may speak up. They may have a better audience with the powers that be, and that can then cause a lot of tension and can cause a lot of drama that doesn't need to happen. But I really think that what you see happening is trying to create safer spaces for people to speak up, but you want to protect the minority point of view too. There's another saying: democracy is two wolves and a sheep deciding what's for dinner, and you don't want that either, because
that is a great one.
Yeah, so you want that sheep to be protected, because you want wolves, but you want sheep. Everybody has a role, and I think it's I mean, for the company to perform, you've got to have some people who have some of those killer instincts, but you also have to have a way to keep them in check and make sure that they don't become, the folks who step on people's, step on others to get ahead, and that you're allowing things to go on that just aren't right. Because you might be you might have short term gains, but in the long term, it's going to destroy the company. And so practically, I think there are some really good tools that are being developed for that. I think they're using things like game theory and some of that stuff to really find ways to understand human psychology and impact the behavior. And you want to impact the behavior, but you want to do it under the guise of this is what our objectives are. And if you can clarify that and train people and do it in their own language, not just their spoken language, but also in kind of the concepts that they understand, I think it can, benefit everybody. And we spend more time at work than we do anywhere else. So if you can make an environment where people feel, that like they can communicate freely, you're going to have a better environment.
Yeah. Well, and I know too, because I always try to bring back ways to help people that are listening actually, have a better life, live a better life. And, I know so maybe we can go here a little ways too, because we've talked a little bit about, corporate and the culture and kind of what you're trying to establish. And I love some of the things like gamification and other stuff. I haven't heard of people actually using that. That's a great way to help change human behavior, right? So using some of these things like this to make sure that you've got the right culture at your organization. But, for individuals as well, people that are wanting to, because one of the people that I learned from used to say, ethics it's not a choice of right or wrong. It's a choice between multiple rights. And that's what often makes it difficult. The right and wrong, if we go back to like corporate code of conduct, right? If the code of conduct says thou shalt not, well, you've taken ethics and you've kind of created compliance around it. And you've said that behavior, not acceptable, right? Okay, so that's a right or wrong based on the code of conduct. But so much of the time in our own personal lives and in trying to decide what's really the best decision for me that's going to serve me the best, but maybe also serve the greater good, how are some easy ways for people to kind of think about that so they can make better decisions, right? Because most of the ethics training people are going through at the end of the year is like, you abide by this code of ethics and you understand you must do this and that. But that stuff doesn't actually help people make better daily decisions. And it's all those little daily decisions that really impact the quality of our life.
Mm-hmm. No, I think so too. And I think, for one of the first things you can do is anybody you bring on board within the company is make sure that you've got an understanding of their perceptions and their understanding of ethics and their understanding of culture, and make sure that they're going to fit well with that culture. The person may have the best pedigree in the world, and they might, but if they don't really buy into what the company's about and what your objectives are, and really care about the people, then you're going to have a lot of people who will see that and they'll say, yeah, that it says on the wall that we adhere to all these things and this is what we're about. But what I'm seeing in reality is that they hired this guy and his objectives are totally the opposite of what we claim to be about. And that's one thing. And then I think it is imperative that they give the title Chief Ethics and Compliance Officer. Make sure that guy or that person, that guy or girl, actually has a seat at the table. Make sure that they are involved in those conversations. They're involved in the merger and acquisition process. They're involved in the sales and marketing component of it. That they see what's going on before it's too late to actually raise a hand. I used to, when I worked with attorneys, and early on in my career, I talked to a guy one time and he said, "Yeah, well, I have to draft up the contract for this deal, And here's what it is. This is the agreement. And it was a napkin that had been between two guys written at a bar. And I was like, well, and he said, I was not involved in this conversation. And so now I have to figure out how to sort through what's already been put together. Well, if you're bringing the chief compliance officer in at that stage, it's too late, because a lot of decisions have been made already, and they have no way to do their due diligence, so to speak. So.
Well, and that's why usually, like that. I mean, that's a great example of, I mean, how things really get done, right? I mean, this person was having a discussion. I mean, they take them out to dinner, they go to a bar, they do whatever. You end up making a business transaction. You put it on a napkin, right? And it's that's why I always tried to, or wanted people to be able to have some guidelines, because it's not always easy. Everything doesn't fit into the nice little decision tree that we we usually like to put things into, right? And so, but things that people can ask themselves or do when they're by themselves, and they can't. Maybe again, it's 11 o'clock at night. Guy probably wasn't. He probably didn't have your phone number, but wouldn't want to wake you up at night while he's actually doing this deal. But things that people can kind of go through in their minds. In one that always really got me, that I used to be a Rotarian, and participate in Rotary, and love the FourWay test that Rotary has as an example of kind of some principles or guidelines that we can give to ourselves, similar to this, so Absolutely. That anytime that we're trying to make a decision, we kind of run through these couple of things in our minds, right? And again, It's been a while. We used to, recite it every time, but I always learned it as, is it, will it, right? So is it, oh, now I'm going to embarrass myself. Is it fair to all concerned? Is it the truth?
Is it the truth? Yeah.
Is it fair to all? You were too? Okay. Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? And will it be beneficial to all? That's what it is. Yep. Is it, will it, right?
And I love that. I love that test too. Because I mean, right. That's a perfect example. So yeah, go on. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No. But for everybody, kind of like as a practical takeaway too, right? Is it's like, okay, yeah, we know we have to follow our code of conduct at work, and you need to understand what it is. You need to know what the conduct expectations are, but you also need to know when things kind of hit you in the face in regular life, right?
Yeah.
Is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all? If you go through and ask yourself questions like that, or whatever you come up with, you're going to hopefully make a better decision than if you didn't consider it at all, right? And the same thing, because I love the word integrity more than I love ethics, because ethics is really kind of more philosophical, where integrity to me is more boots on the ground, actually doing stuff. And it's like, it doesn't mean that you don't ever make a mistake, but when you recognize it, you fix it and you do what you're supposed to do. Right. So if we go back, let's say, to that example you were talking about before, you hire somebody, you think they're going to be a good fit. They come into the organization. Pretty quickly, you find out they're not a good fit. Okay. You made a mistake. Now, whether you have integrity or not is going to determine on what you do next, right? Do you actually, fix that person's behavior or get them out of the organization? Or do you turn a blind eye and say, well, they're the top salesperson in the company, so they're earning us lots of money, so we're going to let them be, disrespectful to our other employees and yell at them and be emotionally abusive to them because, hey, at the end of the day, this person's bringing in $20 million a year to our company, right? That's where the integrity, to me, really actually hits. And if we're willing to fix or take responsibility and fix things that are our fault.
Yep. And I think the Rotary FourWay test is a great example of a great philosophy and a great kind of way to kind of gauge everything you do as on behalf of other Rotarians in any type of situation. And if a company has something that's simple, easy to remember, but it also represents what the company stands for, it's perfect. But then you completely shoot yourself in the foot if you don't live by those principles at the highest level. And so if it's hard to bring in someone and say, hey, this is my guy, I recommend him, I think he's going to be great, and you find out that they don't fit. Well, you've got to figure out a way to make that right. And if you don't, everybody who sees what's going on, and and I hate to admit this, but I've got 3 boys that I'm raising, and they've seen the hypocrisy of dad, and consequently, I pay the price for it. So you don't want that at your company. And kids are a lot more honest than employees are. They won't say anything, but a lot of those quality people who love what you stood for will be gone in a few years because they realize it's not legitimate.
Well, yeah, because so much of this falls back to the leaders or to us individually, right? I mean, yeah, I'm a dad too, and we do our best, right?
No, exactly.
We do our best. We're still flawed. Everybody is that way, right? We try to, but if you're trying to do your best and you have some of these little tools or things that you're trying to rely on to always try to make the best decisions that are in line with your values, and again, whether this is work or even personal life, we'll make mistakes, but then you just clean them up. You do the best you can to kind of rectify it. But like you said, everybody's wanting to talk about culture in organizations right now. And I will tell you, I mean, I'm guessing this has been your experience too. The companies that have the culture problems are because of the leaders who don't really have integrity. Now, if you ask them, they would think that they are, but I'll tell you, the most unethical people I've ever met are the people who think they're the most ethical. And if people don't believe what you say, they believe what you do. And so if you don't actually walk the talk, and here was a great example. One of the CEOs that I worked for, we'd done some, we would do executive T&E audits, just because from an ethics and compliance and a fraud perspective, if executives are cheating on their expense reports, they're probably cheating other places too, right? So we would use that as a gauge for kind of knowing which areas of the company were more at risk. And I remember, we had in this one round that we did, we found 2 executives that blatantly cheating on their stuff, right? One guy, it was between 50 and 100 grand, right? That he doctored, created false credit card receipts. Okay. Very clear, that guy was gone, turned him over to the local law enforcement, right? Another guy, it was maybe $1,800, but it was just stupid stuff. Like he would take this was in the old day when you used to get toll, when you go through the toll booth, you'd get like a little receipt. You don't do that anymore with all the PayPals, but it'd be like $1.60 for the toll, and he'd add a 0 to the end of it with a red pen and put down $16. It was just stupid stuff, right? And I remember, so you look at that and you think, well, it's only $1,000 or whatever, right? And so I went and was talking to this person's boss, and they said, oh, we just promoted him, and it's like, we just sent out this big message to our customers. We can't get rid of him. He's always been a good guy. We don't have to do this, do we? And I'm like, no, we have to do this to be consistent, right? Oh, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. So I went back to my CEO and said, I just talked to so-and-so, and this is the story that I'm getting from him. And our CEO just looked at me and he said, don't worry, I'm on a plane with him this afternoon. Before we land, this will be taken care of, right? Because to the CEO, he didn't care. He didn't care what the amount was. He cared about the behavior of the individual. And again, if you steal $5 from me, if you're going to, if you steal $5 from me, you probably steal 5 million from me too. So he was one of the few leaders at that level that always walked the talk, right? And I really appreciated that in him. We need more leaders like that everywhere. And if you don't have a leader like that, then you be that leader, right, for yourself. Because other people are watching. Like we said, our kids are watching us as parents, and everybody else is watching you as well. So anyway, sorry, got off a little bit on my soapbox there. You remembered that story. It was, yeah.
Well, my dad's favorite saying was, and it goes to this very well, is actions speak louder than words. And people are, you can say it all day long, but, you know, and my kids, and with my kids, I found that's true. If I, you know, and I do some, in my defense, I do some things right. And what resonates and what they remember is how I behaved. And they've seen me, they see me do things. I see, you know, it always warms my heart when I see them kind of emulating that, and the good stuff. The bad stuff kind of makes me feel bad. But I think at a company, I mean, when you got a leader like that, and I've been in both situations with, you know, I've had one guy who I said I would follow into battle because I knew that he would do the right thing no matter what. And he was actually at LexisNexis, and he rose up through the ranks. He left not too long ago. Has had a fantastic career, and I mean, I think a big part of that was just that you know, everybody saw what he had built, and you know, I think that but those are rare. People like that are rare, and if you find one like it, stick with it. But it's because it's not easy. It's not easy. And that's what the ethics and compliance person wants to put in place is tools and you know, do their due diligence and do the right things in order to, you know, create an environment for that. And you know, it's a lot harder to get rid of the problem when you hire that guy it doesn't fit with the culture. So if there's ways to do your due diligence up front, and not to make it a plug for integrity risk, but we have a report called an executive check. That's a very good one.
Because especially the higher level you get in an organization, if you're hiring an executive, well worth the money at that point to do something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, it can come back to bite you in many ways. Certainly internally, what your people see, but also your reputation as an organization. And that is a recommendation. And then putting in tools. And now with all the data analytics and the things that we have that are available to us, not to be measuring your culture, not to be measuring doing you know, audits that are geared toward this, you know, is a mistake. You need to be diligent about that, and then make sure that what you find from those reports and those programs are then implemented, and that you execute on it. There's a saying that a friend of mine said, you know, you cannot change what you don't measure. And so, you know, you may think you have the best culture in the world, and you may have the greatest slogan on the wall, like I said, but if you are not in there and actually looking at the T's and C's of the entire corporation, you're really not, you don't know. And you may find that, you know, even though it says that on the wall and you believe in it, the rest of the company doesn't buy into it. And so you need to be out there asking the people who are on the front lines how they feel about it and what the perception is. And yeah, I think that another one of my grandmother's sayings, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Yeah. And so I do think there's some things that we can do to do that. But you got to have good leadership in that case too. They've got to be able to willing to pay up front to find those things. And unfortunately, in my experience, you always, as a sales guy, a consultative sales guy in this space, I'm always going after the company that's gotten in trouble because now they have the budget. It's nice when you find one that's willing to make the money, to spend the money up front to try and prevent those things from happening.
Well, and that's, you know, that your grandmother's saying that is, and it's literally that kind of a difference in magnitude that, you know, maybe here to kind of wrap up here is that, you know, again, it's, people that have gotten into bad mistakes all of a sudden have the money to pay for it, but it costs them 10, 20, 30 times the amount at that point to clean it up than if they actually do it preventatively. And so again, whether it's your company or also, us individually, the more we can do now to change and try to prevent those things from happening by, being people of integrity, keeping our word, fixing mistakes as they come up, that ounce of prevention is worth a whole lot of pain and suffering, as well as potentially money as well. So, well, John, thank you. Thank you for taking time today. We could have gone down a couple of other rabbit holes today, so we might have to go on one of those on a future episode as well. But thanks for taking the time with me and coming on and sharing with everybody today.
Thank you, Jason. It was a lot of fun for me, and I enjoyed the conversation. I hope other people enjoy it. It's fun for me to talk about this stuff. So, and I love your podcast. So thanks for letting me be a part of it.
Well, thank you.
All right.
We'll see you later.
Take care. Bye-bye.
And that's a wrap. Thanks for listening to today's episode of Jamming with Jason. Keep on rocking in the audit world. Have a great rest of your day, and I'll catch you later on the next show. If you'd like to earn continuing professional education for listening to today's episode, head on over to C-Risk Academy at ondemand.criskacademy.com. And that's C as in the letter C, riskacademy.com. Not only do you get a CPE certificate, but you also will have access to the video version of today's show. The views and opinions expressed on this show are that of the individuals and not of their respective organizations.